Hey sports fans, Coach Nick here and welcome to BBallBreakdown. We have Kyle Korver here to talk about some shooting fundamentals. Now, let's get off the bat and talk about the hop versus the 1-2 because you're sort of our poster child for the hop, but we do notice you shoot the 1-2 as well. So do you have any insight into when you hop besides when you 1-2?
Yeah, I mean, usually it depends on the pass. You know, if I have my choice, I'm probably going to go 1-2, but a lot of times the way I move off the ball, the timing of when the ball's coming to me, I kind of have to do a hop. It just feels weird to do a 1-2. So, you know, it really just depends on the game.
So if you had to imagine, if you had to count up all your shots, hop versus 1-2, do you think it might be like half and half, or do you do one more than the other?
I have no idea. I would guess I'd have more 1-2 because that's what I work on more, but you would probably know more than me.
I do. Well, listen, the hop is beautiful when you do it, so I'd be surprised if you didn't. Now, let's talk a little bit about reading that pocket pass. When you're coming off that pin down, and you seem to have an innate sense of when to hit the screener or when to shoot it and when to attack. Is there a trick or is there a technique that you use that allows you to read that well?
Well, I mean, I try to read my defender well before I even make it to the screen. So, you know, when I create the separation, when I start my move, you know, I usually know if I've got him beat or not, and then I'm just reading the help. If I feel like the help is sagged off, I'm probably going to rise up and shoot it. If I feel like he's coming at me, then I know I'm going to have to make a read. And, you know, you just kind of, you know, when I catch the ball, like my first read is to the big who set the screen. If that's not there, it's going to be to the other big who's flashed in the middle. And if that's not there, it's probably to the point guard, you know. So, yeah, but as far as with the actual, you know, the moment when I should know, I feel like if I'm going to be open well before I actually come off the screen.
So it sounds like you have a sense of as you're coming, you're almost kind of, you have to look back a little bit, right, to sort of see what's happening. But when does the notion of shooting come into that? I feel like you talked about reading the pass, but how about the shot?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I know if I'm going to shoot it, I mean, well before I actually, you know, come off the screen, you know. So it kind of feels like a quarterback in some ways, you know. I feel like, you know, I've never really played quarterback before, but that's kind of how I feel when I'm coming off. I mean, I feel like I'm just kind of reading it. And, you know, I feel like if my man's been beat, I should have known that probably 3 or 4 steps ago. And then I'm just reading the big. And, you know, if he's not there, I know I'm going to pull up and shoot it.
We've been breaking down the offense, and one thing that we've always said was the one way to get a shooter open is to have him screen first. You are setting a ton of screens all over the place. Comment on that. Does that feel like it gets you open a lot more?
Yeah, I mean, as a shooter, I mean, if I just kind of stand still, I'm pretty easy to guard. But I feel like the more I can move around, you know, the harder I am to guard. And you know, if the guy who's guarding me is worried about helping after I set a screen, that just gives me another opportunity to possibly get open. So luckily here in the system, I mean, Bud gives me a ton of freedom. I think sometimes I drive him crazy setting too many screens, but it just makes me feel like I'm more part of the game and I'm more dangerous. And you know, a lot of times guys don't really want to leave me. So if I can set a good screen, if I'm not getting open, somebody else probably is.
So that wasn't a design play when, like, it looks like DeMar Carroll's going to set a down screen for you, and then all of a sudden you kind of wrap around and screen for him. Was that sort of a freelancing that you were doing?
That's just a read, and you know, me and DeMar are always talking during the game. And Jeff, you know, we have a bunch of like concepts that, you know, Bud doesn't want us to do the same thing over and over again. So, you know, sometimes he'll set for me, sometimes I'll call Curl and set for him. It just kind of depends on what we're reading.
Your man's talking trash to you, and they're knocking you on your butt, and you said you talk to coach and say, you know, get me a shot. I want to score on this guy. What's the action that you want to run to get that shot?
I usually do like setting the screen first. You know, if I can set a good screen first and get my man thinking about something else, and then kind of, you know, darting off something. I don't want to give away too many secrets, you know, but it's usually something like that.
Last question: when you were growing up, when did you realize that, geez, shooting is going to get me where I want to go?
Yeah, it didn't take very long. You know, I've never been the most athletic guy, you know, but it's just something I've always enjoyed. I wasn't playing basketball to make the NBA. I played basketball because I loved it, and I loved shooting, and I just, you know, just the part. I loved watching it. I loved watching it on TV. I loved watching it at the park. I loved playing. So, I mean, it wasn't – I mean, I just – you know, I do it because I love it, and it turned into a job. Was there a mechanic that you realized, geez, this is really helping me? We have a couple things that we talk about, the turn, where you're not actually 10 toes to the rim. You have a little bit of a turn to let your, you know, elbow and waist lead. Do you realize that you have a little bit of a turn when you shoot? Yeah, I think it's just genetics. I would probably – I mean, I like to be able to turn well into my shot. I probably wouldn't want the turn as I'm shooting. It's something that I'm constantly trying to fix a little bit, actually, but it's just kind of who I am and the long hips and legs that I have. So, but as far as the actual mechanic, man, my shot was all over the place when I was growing up. I had helicopter spin until my junior year of high school. You know, I had weird mechanics, and it really just took me to get stronger. You know, like if I finally grew into my shot, so to say. You know, like it was quite a process.
So there wasn't a magic moment where someone said if you use like the finger together to get that spin backwards. There wasn't anything like that. It just so naturally developed.
No, my shot got all screwed up, and I was trying to listen to those guys. Yeah. To be honest with you, I had a bunch of guys kind of messing me up a little bit. So, yeah, you know, obviously there's some basic mechanics, shooting you, and you know how it comes off your fingers that helps, but there wasn't a moment really.